Thanks so much to everyone who's joined us, and welcome to the first installation of our two-part shareholder activism webinar series. What is shareholder activism? The next in our series will be how to co-file a shareholder resolution, and that will be on November 2nd. You'll have lots of opportunities to register for that event while you're in this event as well. And in that webinar, and the next one, we will provide an overview of what a shareholder resolution is and why we use them to pressure companies. We'll give you a step-by-step explanation of the filing process and an opportunity to let us know if you'd be interested in co-filing with us. So like I said here, my colleague Laura has dropped the registration link in the chat. If you'd like to register now, feel free to do so. But we'll also post the link at the end of the session. So before we get started, I'm just going to go over a few guidelines to make sure everyone has as good an experience today as possible. So as you noticed, we are recording today, and the reason for that is so that those who couldn't make it can still get all of the information and opportunities to get involved in our shareholder activism work. And if you're watching a recording, hi, thanks for watching. So we are going to keep all participants muted today, but please type any questions or comments in the chat box at any time. My colleague Laura will collect the questions for us to answer midway through the webinar and then at the end. And if you didn't get your question answered, feel free to follow up with us via email as well. There will also be times when we ask you to type your answers to a specific question into the chat box. But of course, you only have to do that if you want to. We invite everyone to participate as much or as little as you would like. And we'd also like to invite you to keep your video on, but only if you feel comfortable. We'd love to see your faces, see what our community of shareholders looks like. But again, only if you're comfortable. And if you have any technical difficulties during this presentation, please type your problem into the text box, and my colleague Laura will help you. Okay, we'll move on to who are we? Who are you talking to and looking at today? So my name is Lacey Colmoose, and I am a campaign manager at SumOfUs. I am leading the initiative to build a SumOfUs shareholder community and leading our efforts to combat water scarcity globally. I have been campaigning for over 10 years and previously worked at CARE2, Public Citizens Global Trade Watch, Organizing for America PA, the Tibetan Women's Association, and the National Democratic Institute. One of my colleagues, Shanda Gupta, will also be speaking today, and she was a veterinary surgeon for 14 years before volunteering at 38 Degrees, and then following spells at Runnymede Trust and Greenpeace UK, she is now a campaigns manager at SumOfUs, where she has worked for 6 years. She leads our UK campaigns, and her collaborative, multi-stakeholder approach has resulted in some really exciting Apple campaign victories. She was also a co-founder of gender justice campaigning group Level Up. And the other colleague of mine who will be speaking today is Alice Sampson Estape. She is a campaigner at SumOfUs for the Latin American team. Alice feels very passionate about justice for all. She previously worked in an organization against gender-based violence, then at the International Institute for Nonviolent Action, where she focused on business and human rights, and then on a campaign to boycott Israel for Palestinian rights. She has been an active activist where she lives for Palestinian rights and the Boycott, Divestments, and Sanctions campaign against Israel. So now that you know a little bit about us, we'd like to know a little bit about you. If you feel comfortable, I would love for all of you to put your name and location and what you're looking to learn from this webinar into the chat box. I'll give you a few moments to do that. Let's see, we have Edwin Berg from the Netherlands. Wow, thank you for joining us. Serena from the UK, John Eldon from Encinitas, California. Nice. Love that you vote your proxies. Great, Shelley. Welcome, Shelley from Jerusalem. Alison Downs from UK. Kate Reeves, wow, there's from France. Jennifer from Zambia, Canada. Stephen from Ireland. Ken from Kenya. Wow, we have such an international crew here. I love this. Lennon Wong from Taiwan. We have Christoph from Australia. Do I need to own evil companies to make them less evil? That's a great question. We have Bridget from NYC, Elliot from New York as well, Julie from California, Christine from Ottawa, Canada, Alex Choi from California. Wow, thank you so much for introducing yourselves. I'm really excited. This is really international and wonderful. So what we're going to be talking about today is that we're going to be going over what exactly is shareholder activism. It's a big name, so we'll unpack that today and then give some examples of what shareholder activism specifically at SumOfUs looks like. Then after a break for questions, we'll show you what kind of results shareholder activism can achieve and then how you can get involved. We'll wrap up with some time for questions and some concrete steps that you can take to get involved right now. But first, we'd like to get a sense of how much you already know about shareholder activism and how to get involved. So please type in the chat box what your knowledge level is on this issue on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being not a lot and 5 being a lot. And again, it's totally okay if your answer is 1. That's why we're here. Nice, yeah. Great. I love point 9, Stephen. I love that. This is great. We have some experts here and we have a lot of people who it seems like this is new for you, which is why we're doing this. So thank you for coming to learn. Okay. So now to help us introduce what shareholder activism is, we're going to watch the first part of a video because everybody loves videos.
Shareholders are individuals, corporations, or organizations that legally own shares of stock in the company. And this gives them the opportunity to propose policies that reflect their values. Are you a shareholder? Think not? Well, you probably are. Even if you haven't directly purchased stock, your pension, mutual fund, superannuation, or retirement fund are likely investing in the stock market on your behalf. Every year, publicly traded companies hold annual general meetings, or AGMs, in which shareholders vote on proposals submitted by shareholders and management. While these proposals are typically related to corporate governance, they also include important social and environmental issues such as climate change, labor relations, human rights, and animal welfare. Once shareholders submit their proposals, the corporations are faced with 3 choices: bring the proposal to a vote, negotiate the proposal with shareholders, or attempt to block the proposal. Right now, corporations are at the center of the world's most shocking violations of human and environmental rights. Shareholder actions are one way to stop them.
Great. I love that video, and you'll see the rest of it later in the presentation. So I'm going to bring it back to you all again. Based on the video and any previous knowledge you may have, I'd love to see in the chat box how you would describe shareholder activism in your own words. Again, there's no right or wrong answer here. We're just kind of see how we all define this. Thanks, Edwin. Let's see, voting on shareholder proposals and encouraging fellow investors to do likewise. I love that. It's definitely an element of shareholder activism. Thanks. Thanks, Edwin. That's it's good to know what shareholder activism looks like in Dutch. Let's see, bringing my concerns to corporations in hopes for change. Yeah, I love that, Julie. From Lenin Wong. Any kind of interruption or campaigns in the AGM, including proposals in the meeting, speaking inside, or holding press conferences and protests outside. Wow, Lenin, I think you have a lot of experience here. That's great. Buying the right stocks? Yeah, that can be shareholder activism. Raising important questions to the co-owners of the company. Yes. As a shareholder owner, we have the responsibility to request that our interests are aired. Nice, yeah. And working to ensure just actions by being proactive with those who hold my investments. Yes, oh my gosh, this is all amazing. And thank you for these definitions, these contributions. These are all elements of shareholder activism. So now I'm going to share the official definition, which you all seems like you already know. Shareholder activism is a range of activities that shareholders of a publicly traded company can undertake with the objective of promoting change within the company. So again, that's kind of the textbook definition, but everything that y'all raised really encapsulates what is shareholder activism. So now I'm going to kind of give you, we had a sense of what the range of activities is. So shareholder activism can be letters that you send to a corporation, or open letters that hundreds or even thousands of shareholders sign on to, demanding that corporations change a policy or behavior. They can be shareholder proposals or resolutions, which is a 500-word request submitted to a company by a shareholder asking the company to address an issue or concern. That specific type of shareholder activism will be what our next session will be all about. Just as a side note. Shareholder activism can also be meetings with a corporation. These are often tied to a petition delivery or a shareholder resolution, but they don't have to be. You can request a meeting as a shareholder with the company executives, decision makers at any time. And then there are actions during the annual general meeting, or the AGM. You can ask a question, you can vote, you can stage a protest or demonstration, you can do a stunt. I think these are some of the things that Lenin raised in their question. And then finally, there are proxy contests, and these are considered the most aggressive form of shareholder activism. This is an attempt to replace a company's board members in order to enact change from the inside. Because proxy fights can be pretty expensive for the company, they often result in a settlement where the firm agrees to give up a board seat. And this is not an area where SumOfUs has worked as much because it does require a lot of people. Usually it's enacted by funds, and they can be quite expensive. But if we can get enough of us together, who knows, maybe this is the type of shareholder activism that we can participate in as well in the future. So where does shareholder activism happen? Well, shareholder activism happens wherever there is an in-person AGM. And you can take a look at the map here and see some of the places where AGMs will be happening this year. For Apple and for Smurfit Kappa, for Meta, for Alphabet, Procter & Gamble, the list goes on. But really, shareholder activism can happen anywhere, even from your living room. So don't feel like you need to live in a big city or in the US to get involved with shareholder activism. A lot of the tactics that we talked about, the different types of shareholder activism that I mentioned already, those can be done from your house, from your couch, or wherever you like to have your laptop. And then shareholder activism at SumOfUs has also taken on many different forms. And so what we'd like to do next is to share with you some examples of shareholder activism that have happened in different countries and used pretty different tactics. And I'm going to hand things over to my colleague Shonda, who will talk about our campaign to stop Apple from using Uyghur forced labor.
Hello, everybody. So today I will be focusing on our ongoing Apple resolutions against forced labour. But before I do, I just want to share a little bit of background. If you can go on to the next slide, Andrea. So 2 years ago, our shareholder proposal on freedom of expression, which we largely filed because of app takedowns in China, which meaning that especially activists didn't have a safe means to communicate because they couldn't access virtual private network apps, actually resulted in Apple publishing its first ever human rights policy. And you can see the sort of media hits we got from that win, including one of my proudest moments being on the sidebar of brief news on the actual physical front page on the Financial Times one weekend. And Apple is a very closed company that plays its cards close to its chest. So getting this result really confirmed for me that shareholder work could generate change in even the most unyielding company, and actually was key to our decision in submitting on forced labor at Apple. We haven't completely stopped our work on freedom of expression, though. A member has co-filed on a related proposal this year, with the resolution being led by a partner organisation. So we are chipping away there. But going back to forced labour, we, with members, have filed on forced labour issues, particularly related to the Uyghur region, given that Apple sources a lot of components from China last year and this year. And the human rights policy that we won with the previous resolution has also given us ammunition for our arguments, because they say that things in that policy that means they should really be doing more to counter forced labour. While we were writing and submitting the proposal and doing all the logistics around filing that you'll learn about in Lacey's next session with you, we were also fighting off Apple's attempts to block us, which they do regularly every year. And we also nurture relationships with representatives and groups from impacted communities, one of whom is actually on this call, I see. And that is vital to this work being authentic and genuine and powerful. And we mobilized some of us members with a petition across the world, and also in sharing social content, social media content, to raise awareness online. And that's vital for the company and its investors to both become aware of the issue, and because they sort of see it being talked about in lots of different places, to learn that it's something they need to pay attention to. We were also invited to meet with Apple representatives to discuss the issues. Often they do that because they're actually hoping we're going to withdraw the proposal. It's often the only way we can actually get meetings with Apple bosses. And we also talk to key reporters to generate media coverage. And both of those things are actually bolstered by the track record we have with Apple AGMs. They know we are serious contenders. And success really breeds success in this context. Now, the AGM is one of the few opportunities for people directly affected by a company, in this case, Apple's decisions, to talk to bosses and investors. And so we support one of our partners to present the resolution in a 2-minute speech. Last year, this was Zumratai Arkin from World Uyghur Congress, and for freedom of expression before that, we had SumOfUs from Students for a Free Tibet, who did the honours for us. And AGMs themselves, while they're the big moment in the corporate calendar, can actually be quite dry, especially for very highly controlled and disciplined companies like Apple. For physical meetings, Apple actually keeps journalists herded away in a room away from the action, watching a live stream, and even prohibits the use of the phones, which are the whole reason for being, and the whole reason that it's being celebrated often in the meeting. It doesn't want them in the room at all. And then when they take place online, you have to register to get onto the live stream, and so on and so forth. And while, of course, you need to reach a minimum stock holding threshold to file a resolution, any shareholder can attend an AGM, vote, and ask a question. So to bring some of this out into the world, we do stunts and actions to take place outside of the proceedings to bring them to life. And we'll also record the proponent's speech to share online. We managed this covertly in one of the meetings with a friendly shareholder who came in and snuck their phone in and videoed SumOfUs quietly. Otherwise, we make a recording ahead of time so we can share it, often actually while the meeting is taking place online. Now I'll hand over to my colleague Alice to talk about the work to return lands in Colombia that have been occupied by a paper company to the Misak community.
Hi everyone, lovely to be here. So yeah, I'm going to share our shareholder experience related to this campaign, where Indigenous groups and campesino groups, mainly the Misak Indigenous group, have been organizing for decades to get their land back from Irish paper company, Smurfit Kappa. Can you go to the next slide, please, Andrea? And I think what's interesting about this tactics we used around the AGM show how shareholder work has to be a part of a broader campaign. And I wanted to give you a bit of background of the things we did that were part of the campaign that were crucial for us to be able to be successful and have impact during the AGM. So when we heard about, when we read that the Misak people with other indigenous and campesino groups were organizing, it was an issue that was well known inside of Colombia, but not at an international level. So the first thing we did was bring it to this international member arena. And of course, some of us members were key in doing that, sharing information on social media. We also found partners in Ireland, because as I said, Smurfit Kappa is an Irish paper company. And with them, we organized a webinar where 600 people participated. So we saw it was something that people were very interested about. And because most people in Ireland who knew Smurfit Kappa very well had never heard that Smurfit Kappa was involved in land destruction in Colombia. And from that webinar, we managed to get an article in the Sunday Times. And that means that there was media interest around this topic. Even though the indigenous groups had been protesting against the company for decades, that the company's strategy had always been to ignore them. So that's when we decided, okay, we're going to do something that they can't ignore. We're going to go to the AGM, we're going to buy shares, and we're going to fly over an indigenous leader who can talk at the AGM. So we bought 10 shares, and we flew over indigenous leader Pedro Jose Velasco Tuminia. We also invited the journalist who had written the first article that was published in the Sunday Times to come as a proxy to come to the AGM as well, because we knew that would highly contribute in getting something in the press. As you might have seen in the previous slide, we also got a huge mobile billboard outside of where the AGM took place, something that they couldn't ignore, with the CEO's face on it, who we know is someone who's very proud and committed to their eco principles. And we went there outside, and we had mysteriously received an email the day before that our shares weren't valid and that we wouldn't be able to enter the AGM, which is very suspicious that happened just the day before. We decided to carry on with our protest with a mobile billboard, and we went there. We entered inside the hotel where the AGM was taking place. And because we had invited press, we had like 3 cameras filming, and that created a lot of pressure, us not leaving. You can see here in the photo, we're in the lobby of where the AGM was taking place, and handing out leaflets to all the shareholders who had, of course, also seen our mobile billboard, shouting and just saying that we weren't going to leave, and also saying that Pedro had flown all the way out of Colombia, all the way over, to come and talk to the shareholders and to the CEO to share his demands, asking the company to leave his lands. And at the beginning, we got a meeting with the lawyer of the company and the vice president of the company. And then because we didn't leave, and because there were camera filming and all the pressure, in the end, they allowed us inside of the AGM, where Pedro spoke for over 40 minutes. So all the shareholders heard his concerns and demands, and the AGM finished right after. And we're quite, there's this anecdote we like sharing, that in the lobby, they had prepared snacks, and because we disrupted the AGM so much, they didn't even eat the snacks, which we thought was quite, quite symbolic. So I think it's important understanding all the things we did before in order to achieve impact. And also, because we flew Pedro all the way over from Colombia to the AGM, we also combined this action where, by the way, the company's response was like they had a written response prepared, which they shared after Pedro's intervention, which didn't address any of the concerns he said, like it was a prepared speech. we combined this with important advocacy meetings with the Irish government, with representatives from the European Union, which have made the campaign advance. I'll leave it here for now. Back to you, Lacey.
Thanks to both of you for sharing all of this wonderful shareholder activism work. I'd like to take a moment to pause. I know we just threw a lot of information at you. So let's take a moment you can type any questions you may have in the chat box. I know a lot of you actually submitted questions when you RSVP'd as well. So we can answer some of those now. And Laura will read any questions that you typed or sent in ahead of time. And me, Laura, and Alice and Shanda will answer those questions as best we can.
Well, we could start with one someone submitted while people think of any questions they might have. So how many shares do we need to own to get involved in shareholder activism?
I'll take that one. That's a really great question, and when we get a lot. So you just need one share to participate in things like letter writing and voting, spreading the word, attending or like doing stunts and protests, donating to a campaign, and even, providing strategic advice for the campaign. Because here at SumOfUs, we want to know what our member shareholders like you would like us to do and what you think is the best thing to do as far as our strategy goes. But there are certain tactics, different types of shareholder activism that do require a certain number of shares. And the big one for that is co-filing or filing a shareholder resolution in the US. So what you need for that is to own at least $2,000 worth of shares for 3 years, or own $15,000 worth of shares for 2 years, or own $25,000 worth of shares for 1 year. And I can also put this in the chat. And this is just for filing a shareholder resolution. The other tactics, you only have to have 1 share to be a shareholder.
Thanks for that, Lacey. The questions are coming in. Let's see, I'm gonna take the second question for now while we organize our thoughts on the back end. So someone asked for the Smurfit Kappa campaign. At what stage of your wider campaign did against the company, did you enact the shareholder strategy? Is it seen as quite an aggressive tactic?
So aggressive depending to who, I guess. So we decided it when we had managed to create media interest, and we saw that SumOfUs community and people all around the world, specifically in Ireland, were interested about this. We thought it would be a good opportunity to combine what was happening, let's say, outside the company and all the noise that was being generated, to bring Pedro in front of the shareholders and the CEO to be able to speak out. I think it's important, as I said, that not seeing shareholder activism as the AGM, like the AGM only as the AGM. I mean, the AGM for sure is the high point, but there's so much that has to happen before and after. And as I said, yes, the company response at the AGM was very standard, didn't full of lies, didn't address any of the issues, but the pressure we created with the media before and then all the advocacy meetings afterwards has forced the company to engage and be open now to talk to the indigenous communities, for example, that they weren't going to do so before.
Thank you, Alice. So another question was, what protest was held in Palo Alto?
Yes, so that one, I can take that one. That was then at the time Facebook, now Meta, around their AGM, and that's also where they are headquartered.
Great. Another question, is Apple taking responsibility for human rights violations in their supply chain?
I guess that's for me. And I guess the answer is yes and no. Apple's interesting. Like many years ago, it did actually deal quite well with human rights abuses in its supply chain. That remember the Foxconn factory scandal, and indeed received an award for eliminating slavery from its supply chain. I would say now it's potentially got a little bit more complex. Apple has got forever more greatly embedded with the government of China and working with Chinese suppliers. And the equal rights issue is state-sponsored forced labor. So its connections with the government there make these all, it ends up getting it tied up in knots slightly with trying to square this circle. I would say what we're doing is creating an ever smaller space for Apple to play this game and to make claims that it can't substantiate. And it's not just that, there are laws around forced labor now coming into the US recently as well, which it's having to work with. So we're making it less easy for it not to take responsibility. I think in some cases it is taking responsibility. I think in others it's finding it a lot harder to do so.
So we have a follow, since you're already on that, a follow-up question from Elliot, also on the Apple campaign. Did you coordinate with management before submitting a proposal to Apple?
You know, not really. For the first one on freedom of expression, Apple had actually ignored many requests from ourselves and for organizations representing impacted groups such as Free Tibet, International Tibet Movement, etc. I mean, repeated emails to talk about these issues, and they were just ignored, actually no response at all until a shareholder resolution was filed. And then they want to have a meeting. And then when we've had a successful resolution, we will go back and say, okay, let's talk about it to stop us from filing another one, essentially. And they do come to the table, but they're not a company that's the easiest or the most meaningful to engage with, to be honest, before actually putting these things in.
Perfect. So a question from Philip: can someone buy a share or shares and then give proxy to SumOfUs or some other activist voting bloc?
Yes, absolutely. I'm actually very excited that you mentioned that. We are currently kind of working with other groups that actually specifically do this, one of which is named Awake. And I think we have a representative from Awake here. But yeah, in the survey that we're going to ask you to fill out to let us know what you'd be interested in doing, one of them is giving your proxy to somebody else. So if you're interested in doing that, please fill out the survey and check that box.
Great. This might answer the last question. We're going to have to cap it here because of time. But Edwin was wondering if you have any suggestions for an investor.
Sure, I can take that one. Yeah, I feel like there's so many things that you as an investor will do or can do. So I guess there are many suggestions. When you fill out the survey, you'll see all the different suggestions for things that you as an investor can do to get involved with shareholder activism. And in our next session, this is a perfect kind of entry point into that. We're going to talk about not only why we do shareholder activism, but how our members have gotten involved and how you specifically can get involved. So definitely, if the next 25 minutes don't answer that question, let's circle back. So let's get into why we do shareholder activism. Okay, so why do we do this? Why is this so powerful? Why do we think this, of all different types of activism, is important? And to help us answer that question, we will go to the video, the second half of the video.
In 2018, SumOfUs took a proposal about the environmental risks of plastic straw pollution to the McDonald's AGM, and now McDonald's, the world's biggest fast food chain, is phasing them out. Why? Because when shareholder power stands up to corporate power, we win. Each year, some of us file shareholder proposals on behalf of our members. We are there with you, side by side, demanding an end to corporate abuses. We amplify your voices and call for changes that will bring about the just and sustainable economy you envision and are actively building. Let's bring the fight to promote people and planet over profit directly to the world's largest companies and make them listen.
Great. So I hope you all got the same shivers that I did. I love that video. It's very inspiring. So why we do shareholder activism? Through meetings and shareholder resolutions and actions at the AGMs, it allows us for direct negotiations with company executives. It's not very often that we get to actually talk directly to those who make the decisions of the company, and shareholder activism gives us that opportunity. Shareholder activism has also proven to be a really effective way to move corporations to make changes that positively impact the environment, worker and human rights, and animal welfare. And Shonda and Alice will show you just how effective these campaigns can be in a moment. I think you already got a taste, but we'll go over the actual results of their shareholder activism work. And finally, one of the reasons that SumOfUs does shareholder activism is because we are a member-led organization. So we want to make sure that we provide high-level, exciting, and impactful ways for you, our members, to engage with our campaign work. And shareholder activism is a great way to get involved, no matter where you live, how much time you can put in, or what your interests or strengths are. I love shareholder activism personally as a campaigner because it is something that is impactful and it's something for everyone. It's a very inclusive way of campaigning. And so it always puts a big smile on my face to talk about shareholder activism and then also to get to work on this type of activism as well. So I'll do the next slide. So we're going to turn it back to you now and what your power is as a shareholder. And the reason that co-filing a shareholder resolution with us, or even simply voting your proxy, is so powerful is that shareholder voices matter to corporate management. Shareholder voices can change company policies, especially if enough individual shareholders like you get together and to decide to form a voting bloc. Or speak out to the press or request a meeting with company executives. I mean, you own as a shareholder a part of the company. So you have power as a shareholder, but you'll have even more power working as a community of shareholders, which is what we're trying to form here at SumOfUs and with partners like our friends at Awake. Okay, next slide. Because now I'll let Shonda show you how SumOfUs member shareholders got involved in her campaign and what happened as a result.
So there are so many ways that a shareholder like you can get involved. And some of them, like voting your proposals or asking a question at the AGMs or handing over your proxy so that somebody else can go and ask a question at an AGM, aren't even on this slide. And I'm not going to read through them, but I'll talk around them. But listed here are the myriad ways that our member shareholders are helping to make Apple change its ways with regard to forced labour and human rights. Some of them, like signing a petition, are of course open to non-shareholders too. But if I'm able to tell a company that a large number of shareholders signed a petition, it can carry more weight. You do, of course, need to own a qualifying amount of shares to actually file or co-file a proposal. But if you do that, you could take the opportunity to do media training with us, as the proponent did last year, so you're ready to tell a wider audience why it's important and why you took that action, and obviously inspire more people to do the same. And while many of us don't own shares directly, we do indirectly through our pension, superannuation, or mutual funds. And so asking those fund managers to support our proposals or proposals that other SumOfUs members have filed are very impactful, because since the stocks they manage are absolutely huge. Last year, one member proponent actually sent the SumOfUs email blast on the pension action, asking other members to email their pension funds and vote for the proposals too. And all of this delivers results in building the vote and then creating impact. So the first stage is to get the vote. And there are such things as investment or proxy advisory firms, ISS, Glass Lewis, that actually advise major investors how to vote their shares. And if they advise to vote for something that we've put forward, you can be pretty much guaranteed of getting a good vote share. And that has happened on a couple of occasions with ISS and Glass Lewis endorsing our Apple proposals. Our first proposal on freedom of information got 40% of the vote. And we've seen how that made Apple put its money where its mouth is and actually publish a human rights policy. And our second proposal on forced labour got 34% of the vote last year. Now, these numbers may sound low, but it is accepted that 30% and above is enough to drive change in the company. And we've just learned this week, a little bit breaking news, it's a bit too late to put up on the slide, that Apple has now published a supplier list, a new supplier list, in an attempt to prove its products are not made with forced labour. And of course, to try and convince us to withdraw this year's resolution. I'm not sure that they're going to be successful in that, but we'll be going back to talk to them again. So back to Alice.
Thank you. So as Shanda was saying, there's so many ways that members can be involved. As I mentioned before, this type of, like, in our campaign, we didn't file a resolution, so it's a slightly different type of shareholder activism. But members have been crucial in the pre, during, and post AGM. So first of all, having a very successful petition, over 160,000 members have signed a petition asking Smurfit Kappa to give the lands back to the Misak people. Members were crucial in raising awareness and bringing and making this an international campaign and sharing lots of information. Members were also crucial in helping us buy the shares. It's thanks to monthly donations from members that we're able to do these types of things. And then specifically in fundraising to bring Pedro over for the AGM and for the renting the mobile billboard and making all the noise, which is what we did. And members were also crucial in fundraising for Pedro's security after the AGM. So as an Indigenous leader in Colombia, we knew he's already under threat for being a human rights defender. And we knew that for him coming over would mean exposing himself a lot in a situation of a lot of violence. And members have fundraised to support his security back home. All of this organizing has resulted in big impact. So we've had huge media coverage in the main outlets in Ireland and in Colombia as well, which is where we want to have most impact. Also combined with important advocacy meetings, as I was saying, with the UN, with EU officials. Pedro spoke, gave a presentation at the Irish Parliament, and all of these advocacy meetings and the pressure that we made at the AGM have resulted in the Irish ambassador in Colombia visiting the Cauca region, where the Indigenous groups are organizing against Smurfit Kappa. Back to you, Lacey.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing how our members got involved specifically in your campaigns and the results that we got and we're still getting and will continue to get from these really inspiring campaigns. I did also want to show all of you that SumOfUs has been working on shareholder activism for nearly a decade. And while we went in depth on the Apple campaign and the Smurfit Kappa campaign, these are just a couple of the examples of ways that SumOfUs and our partners and our member shareholders have made an impact on companies. Just some other examples to throw out there for you. We also got Apple to drop Project Dragonfly, a spying censored search engine in China, We pressured TD and Scotiabank into making and enacting plans to stop financing fossil fuels. And our pressure ultimately led Kinder Morgan to drop the Trans Mountain Pipeline. So this work is ongoing, it's far-reaching, and we'd love for y'all to get involved or continue your involvement if you already have helped us win some of these campaigns. So next slide, please. So now that we've been chatting with you for 50 minutes or so, 40 minutes, I'd like to ask you again to let me know in the chat box on a 1 to 5 scale, how much do you know about shareholder activism and how to get involved now? And it's okay if you're still a 1, I understand. Great, thanks, John. Great, Lennon. Nice. Yay. In the beginning, we saw a lot of 1s and 2s, and I'm seeing 3, 4s, and 5s now. That's very exciting. Thank you for that feedback. Okay, next slide. So now that you know about shareholder activism, what it is, and the ways that you as a shareholder have power to make a difference with these companies, I'd like to talk about the specific next steps for how to get involved in our shareholder campaigns now. We're going to have a lot of campaigns and shareholder activism actions that we're planning for the next year, and we're coming up on shareholder resolution filing season. So I'd first like to invite you to RSVP to register for our next session, which will go into detail about what is a shareholder resolution, what are the steps for co-filing, and then what are the steps that you would need to take to co-file with us. And I promise you, it's not as scary as it sounds or as time consuming as it sounds. And we'll even have some of our member shareholders who have co-filed with us for the last 2 years to share their experiences with you as well. So please, please, please register now or bookmark it to register after this webinar is over. And then next, I'd like to invite you to fill out the survey. If you are inspired to get involved with our shareholder activism, whether you own 1 share or tens of thousands of shares, whether you're interested in, just keeping updated and voting for the resolutions that we put forth, or if you're interested in co-filing or helping us with some stunts, fill out the survey. It should only take like 5 minutes, maybe even less, to let us know how you'd like to get involved. And once you do, we will reach out to you with some more specific next steps based on what you said in the survey. Yes, John. And also, I will let you know, I will follow up with an email to all of you, and those who couldn't make it but were still interested in getting the recording, I'll follow up with the recording of this presentation so that you can watch it again if you'd like to, as well as the links to the registration for the next webinar and the survey to fill out. So please do it now, but if you can't right now, you'll get an email with all of these links as well. Okay, so now that we've gotten all of the next steps taken care of, I'd like to spend the next 9 minutes answering your questions.
So we've already got a couple that came up during the presentation. The first one is it possible for shareholders to pool their shares to reach critical mass for submitting a proposal?
I love this question. And the answer is yes, yes, yes. Please, this is what we do when we're talking about co-filing a resolution. When we combine all of our shares, the shares that some of us owns, the shares that you all own in a company, we can together file a proposal. So please fill out that survey if you have some shares and you're interested in co-filing. The more people we get to co-file with us, the more powerful the resolution will be.
Great. Thanks for that. So it seems a couple of people have voted on shareholder resolutions, but they're not sure how to see the results, or they often don't get the results. So the question is, how do we get results of the proposals? And also, the company always asks us to vote against these proposals. Is it better to hold rallies and get press coverage?
I will take this one, Lara. How do you get the results of proposals? The company has to release the vote results, and it'll be slightly different at different places in the world, but we generally deal with our proposals in the US because that's where it's slightly easier to file resolutions. And there is a time frame, which I can't remember off the top of my head, during which they have to release the results. And you should be able to find those through the investor portal on the website, or whatever sort of broker you use should be able to help you to do that. You can always email the company secretary and ask them directly if you would like to do that as well, to get the results that you need. When exactly they release the results is a little bit in the gift of the company. And in fact, after our last vote on forced labor at Apple, I think Apple were a bit annoyed that we managed to get such good media when we got the 40% on the first round, and we had it released and press release ready, because I actually released the result in the meeting itself. I've got a lovely photograph of the projection of it. And so this year they held their meeting on the Thursday, and then on the Friday night, just after everyone had done the press, they released the results with their narrative. And so they really controlled how we could use the press for that. So yes, ask the company portal, or the company secretary should be able to give that for you. The company always asks us to vote against these proposals. Is it better to hold rallies and get press coverage? I would do both. If the company is asking you to vote against the proposal, it's because they don't want to have to deal with it. So actually voting for and doing what the company doesn't want to do, if it's something you disagree with the company on, is a good way to register that disapproval. And it actually will help you get press coverage as well. People holding rallies on their own aren't always a good way of securing media, but having something else going along, like, 30% of investors, 25% of investors, 20%, 50% of investors defied the company and voted against, is actually a good headline. And that's one of the headlines that we got with the freedom of expression proposal, where the FT was like 4/5 of Apple shareholders defied the company and voted against them. So I would say use all these things as a package of different ways to create pressure and to make change.
Perfect, thanks for that. Follow-up question, if you know the answer, why are companies allowed to make recommendations on how to vote?
I don't know what the roots of that are. I guess because they're in control and they're running the company, and they think they know best, and so they've got a right to do it. They can often, with making their recommendation, they also give us ammunition or things to look more into in their arguments and to undermine them even further. They are managing the company. They do have rights. There is a right for them to manage the company, and sometimes, which you'll hear more about, I think, in the shareholder proposal session, proposals can get rejected because there are rules about the sort of proposals that you can put in, and proposals can get rejected on the grounds of micromanagement or day-to-day business. And so recommending a vote against is often a way to demonstrate that they've got a handle on day-to-day business. They can get you blocked for putting those sorts of proposals in. But yeah, I guess they have a right to show that they are doing what they think, well, to tell you what they think they're doing.
Thanks for that. Another question, is there an easy way to learn which companies are in a fund?
I can take this one. So I would say emailing the fund directly. The fund should provide you with that information. Yeah.
Perfect. So is there any current activism around stopping the top 20 banks funding fossil fuel projects? And this question was asked because in the survey we list specific companies we're interested in.
So I'll just quickly add that, yes, asking banks to divest from fossil fuels is one of SumOfUs' priorities. And there's lots of campaigns targeting Barclays, TD, and many other banks, asking them to divest from fossil fuels. Maybe Lacey, you can give exact information on which are the shareholders' resolutions that will be put forward this year.
Yeah, so we are currently developing resolutions for the companies that you see listed in the survey. Some of them are more concrete and some of them are still in the works. So there is a space for putting forth resolutions that specifically talk about climate change. A lot of what we're planning at the moment has to do with human rights and worker rights. But, you know, sign up to help to attend some strategy sessions. We'd love to hear what you would like us to file on and what you would be interested in filing on with us. So yeah, and even if we don't get as many or climate focused resolutions out this year, you know, the process starts again and we can do it next year as well. And we'd love to hear your input on that and get your help with that.
Great, thanks for that. We do have time for one more question. So I think what some of us always wonder is shareholder activism a reason to own shares in evil companies? Why would we want to be supporting evil companies?
I can respond that one. We would say yes, as our example of campaigns have shown, having that power, owning shares in evil companies allows, for example, for an indigenous leader to come all the way from Colombia and be able to have the opportunity to speak out in front of the other shareholders and the CEO and get their voices heard. Also, you can vote for resolutions. You can even speak out in the media as a shareholder. There's so much you can do. But as we're saying today, being connected and doing this as a collective and as a community will help us have impact. So we would say definitely, and let's get organized to make sure that we create impact against these companies.
Yeah, and I'll also add though that we would love for you to keep your share in evil companies and use them for good, but divestment campaigns can also be pretty powerful. So it's really what your gut says you should do and what you feel comfortable doing. We can show you all the cards, but you have to pick which one you'd like to pick. So we are now exactly at time. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us today. This has been such a wonderful discussion. Your questions and your comments were fabulous and definitely taught me some things as well and had me think about things I hadn't thought about before. So please, once again, RSVP, come to our next webinar session, how to co-file a resolution on November 2nd. Fill out the survey and keep an eye out for an email from me for more materials and next steps and a recording of this video. So thank you, everybody, and have a really great rest of your day.